I was on a hike on Santorini in Greece and encountered a pack of wild dogs.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Nothing happened with the
Where
dogs.
is this going? Where is
Oh
this
my
going?
God.
All right. Well, this is it, guys. We're here. We're hanging out with our new friend Jay Slice.
We've
Well,
already had a
you know-
lot of fun.
You know what? I should use the name that her God-given name, Jessica Slice. Jay Slice is just what we call her because we're
tight.
super tight. And I'm excited to talk to you, Jessica, because well, firstly, you have a way with words, from what I can tell, based on your extensive resume. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but Jessica's been published in Modern Love, the New York Times, the Washington Post, amongst many other
all the
wonderful
heavy
things.
hitters.
Yeah, all the heavy hitters. And has written a number of books that mostly pertain to the topic of disability in some way or form. A kid's book about disability called This Is How We Play. A book that's coming out soon called Unfit Parent. That's about being a parent living with disability. But another one, which I'm kind of really curious to talk about at length today, is about dating and dating with a disability. Jess's book, Dateable, Swiping Right, Hooking Up, and Settling Down While Chronically Ill and Disabled, was a book that you co-authored, correct? With who was your co-author with that one?
Caroline Cupp, who's also my co-author on the picture book.
Oh, cool, sweet, amazing.
Very cool. This is a topic that we've, we've grazed over this topic many times.
It's a topic that I feel like gets touched on almost always when we're speaking to someone living with any matter of illness, and we kind of we get the nudge or the vibe that they might mention something about the single life, or they might mention something about I had this one partner, and then it's always like, hey, let's talk about dating. Let's talk about dating and disability and how that affects your life. So I guess we're going to get into all that and more. Can't wait for it. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today. Please take a moment, introduce yourself to all of our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I started listening to you all in 2015.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
OG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She listened to 2 episodes and was like, not for me. But you started way back.
Yeah,
so
and here we
cool.
are 9 years later.
Yeah, we're still here.
This is why we call her J Slice.
Yeah, Jeremy, when you called, I texted my sister because she listened with me. And I was like, I give you 3 guesses for who just called me. And then she just started listing all my ex-boyfriends. I was like,
And you're like, okay, whoa,
getting
hold on,
colder
slow the
and
roll.
colder.
I'll give
Yeah.
you. Okay, let's do this more like 20 questions.
So I'm Jessica. I live in Canada, but when I started listening to you all, I lived in California, and I'm from the U.S. I am a writer and disabled. I have 2 kids, a 6-month-old and a 7-year-old, and I'm married, living in Ontario.
Hey,
Cool.
You have 2 kids and you're married and you're disabled? That doesn't make sense.
How the
What?
hell?
How does that work?
Impossible.
What the
That's
fuck?
What the heck? What the heck?
Something doesn't add up here. Imposter.
Yeah, true.
Well, let's dive right into your personal journey. You say that you are disabled. What is it that qualifies you for the disability tax credit? Miss, I live on Ontario. What is your have you always been disabled, or is this was this something that sprung upon you at some point in your life?
So the story of how I became disabled, one, it was traumatic, but 2, it feels like oddly epic. I was 28, not disabled, and a runner, very busy, just like a very, very active person. And I was on a hike on Santorini in Greece and encountered a pack of wild dogs.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Nothing happened with the
Where is
dogs,
this
actually.
going? Where is
Oh
this
my
going?
God.
She's like, I'm the first human.
Jesus Christ.
I'm the first human to have gotten rabies, but survive and always have it. I'm so thirsty, but things are going good. I wrote a couple books.
Oh my God. You really,
I actually
you
thought-
really planted a false flag there with the
Yeah,
pack
well,
of dogs.
It's because of the dogs. So they
Okay.
started to approach, and the only way to get away from the dogs was to add a couple miles to a hike, and I already had the beginnings of heat exhaustion when I encountered the dogs.
Oh, wow.
And so I ended up with pretty severe heat exhaustion after avoiding this pack of wild dogs. And that heat exhaustion led to a neurological condition, POTS, which you've had lots of people with POTS on. But I woke up the next day and couldn't get out of bed. And from that day forward, I can't sit up for more than about 5 minutes without being reclined in support. I can't walk very far. I'm a wheelchair user. But the onset was, over that one day after the encounter with a pack of wild dogs on Santorini.
Oh my God. I had no idea that heat exhaustion. I mean, I guess I suppose the amount of times that I've said I have heat exhaustion and don't actually, just as like just being, verbose about being hot.
It's 100% of the time.
And Canadian.
Yeah. I've definitely never actually had heat exhaustion, but I was very unaware that severe heat exhaustion could actually cause a neurological disorder. That is wild.
Yeah, I think as it turns out, I also have a connective tissue disorder, which I know you all have talked about before, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for a long time after I became sick, I thought about that hike and just thought about what could I have changed? I kept thinking about the dogs, about my hydration, how much water did I bring? Did I have enough electrolytes?
What if you had fought the dogs?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Bark back.
That was
Yeah.
Then you'd get rabies for sure.
It would have been something else probably. Yeah, if you fought the dogs. Yeah, lice
Yeah.
or something.
I've actually since Googled wild dogs on Santorini, and there's this corner of the internet where people have stories about their encounter with this pack of dogs on this
It's
trail.
the same pack.
They think, they all describe this one trail and this pack of dogs, but
sounds like
Wouldn't
an
it be
epic
crazy?
song.
Wouldn't it be crazy
Wild
if they,
dogs in Santorini?
Wouldn't it be crazy if you looked it up and they were actually like, it's actually wild. Santorini is the only place in the world where there's actually 0 dogs, and you
were tripping balls.
And you actually were tripping because of the heat exhaustion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which actually made you then go to 2 or 3 miles further, which just doubled down.
Well,
the heat exhaustion.
I mean, that sounds silly, Taylor, but oddly enough, there is a bit of a kerfuffle going on right now in Halifax. There was a man attacked by a bear.
Allegedly.
Well. The man has lots of stitches. He had a lot of big lacerations. Did you see the guy? I mean, he was lacerated up, and they are very gnarly photos. Staples, his head stapled together. He was on the news talking about how he got attacked by a bear. They shut down this park because of a bear, and then the government came out, the city came out, and was like, there was no bear attack, and the guy's like, but I was attacked by a bear. And everybody's like, well, wait, who's lying? What's
he
happening
also
here?
said that he took a nap on the trail afterwards.
He did it. So, a lot of the speculation is that
Jay Slice, this is why we asked you to prove it.
That's right. Because you never know.
Did I come on to poke holes in my my story?
Yeah, actually, your sister called me before you called her and said, look, I got a sister. I need you to grill her, okay?
Yeah.
None of us
Something
believe her.
doesn't add up. So my sister actually also has POTS and EDS, but she was not sick at all. And then a couple years after I encountered the dogs, she was in South America, got overheated, and she became sick with the same thing.
Oh, no.
And we then saw a geneticist who diagnosed the connective tissue disorder. And, with that, I kind of came to terms with the fact that there was going to be some physical stressor at some point that was going to turn on this neurological condition.
Okay.
Because, the tendency to think through all of my own actions as if I had, some control, what could I have done different? And I now think nothing. I mean, that maybe I could, I wouldn't have taken that one hike, but I would have taken another hike.
Right,
for sure.
Right.
My car would have broken down one on a hot day. I was never going to avoid all physical stressors forever.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been curious, Jessica, about this, people who get these types of disabilities. I want to say later in life, but you were 28 at the time you said.
Yeah.
And
That's later. Yeah, that's later.
I guess
I mean, it's later than me.
than,
I got
being
mine in
was
utero,
born.
so it's a bit later. Yeah.
Right. So and you mentioned that you were a runner, and obviously you were in Santorini, and so traveling, but then you get this disease where it's now like hard to sit up for an extended period of time, or you need to be like sitting against something. What is that experience like, or what has that experience been like for you?
So at first, I just want to make sure I like tell this as accurately as possible, because it's easy to like hop into my own narrative that I've told so many times. But you know, at first I thought it wasn't real, because I saw doctors and they kept saying, you know, sure, you know, you got overheated, but you'll recover. And I was like, okay, I'll recover. And so it's like every day I woke up expecting to not be sick. And that went on for a year or more. Like it's remarkable to me in retrospect how long we can delude ourselves. You know, I kept being surprised. I would get up, try to go get coffee, and end up lying on the floor, and I'd be like, whoa, how did this happen, when it you know, had happened hundreds of times. And also, you know, which is so common because I was a young woman, I kept being told that I was inventing my symptoms. You know, they kept saying, are you sure you're not just hyper focused on your own body? Are you sure it's not just stress? You know, the common hysteria trope. And I started to believe that. So first I was surprised, and then I started to think like, well, I guess I'm so anxious that I've created this whole reality of my body. I guess like I created the whole pack of dogs. But
Yeah, we've
but I
already established the creation of the hallucination of the dogs.
It's a debunking episode.
I think you're fine.
I mean, like, there is. I do have a thought.
Oh, he said it.
I do have. That does bring a thought up, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but just out of curiosity, you know, that line of thinking. I'm sure we could all come up with a variety of reasons as to why someone might experience that. You know, something that you're not familiar with all of a sudden is now like a new normal, a part of your life, and very easy to kind of just like forget that this thing is affecting you, or can, you know, there's certain things that can trigger you, and it's like, oh, it just, you know, you're not used to it yet to be able to catch on the things that might like pop up and surprise you. But how much of that do you think potentially could have been a result of being diagnosed with something that, and I'm making an assumption here, something that you maybe didn't have a lot of previous knowledge about? You know, it's like if you go, hey, you have POTS, I would guess most people would go, what the fuck are you, what are you talking about? What is that? I don't know what you're talking about. But if you say you have cancer, well, you know damn well what cancer is. Most people have heard of cancer. So like, do you feel like there was this almost a lack of mental understanding or awareness or familiarity with what you were diagnosed with that potentially contributed to this sort of, I don't know, like it not just clicking, I guess. Yeah,
well,
the belief.
So actually I didn't get what I guess didn't express clearly is I didn't get diagnosed. It took 2 years. And
okay.
During those years, and instead of a diagnosis, I was told it was my own anxiety.
Right.
And so what I ended up doing is I went and saw a psychiatrist, and I said, I think I'm so crazy that I don't know I'm crazy, and that I'm causing myself to think I feel like I'm dying all the time. And he listened like more than any doctor had. And he said, okay, when do you, and I guess it's worth saying, like, I think mental illness is really important, and I don't look down on people who are mentally ill, but I also, that was not what was happening in this case. And he really listened to me, and after he asked for examples of when I felt the most terror, and I said getting gas in the car, taking a shower, waiting in line, and he put together that those are all times when you stand up and stand still. And he said, I think you might have a neurological condition that causes some cardiac issues, and I think you should see a cardiologist and get this one specific test. Wow. And so I had gone in asking him for a psychotropic medication to cure my anxiety, which I had finally, I was like, I guess it's anxiety. And he said, no, all these doctors have been wrong. And so I went to the doctor, and that's when I was diagnosed with POTS.
Wow.
I mean, like, I know I said it, and we said it a couple times about jokingly about, you know, prove it. But like
Yeah.
when it comes to especially neurological stuff, I mean, that is the experience of a lot of people with neurological disorders, that they really do. They almost are, possibly for their entire lifetime, being asked in some small way or big way to prove it, because it's not something that you.
And if you're a woman, like that's
obvious.
jacked up even higher.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that, even more so.
Because it's not like when you have something that is invisible, you know, like your leg isn't up in a cast or whatever, like something that's like very blatantly obvious to the eye, then I feel like people, especially, you know, you can say, I have this, let's say, you know, you get diagnosed and then you say it to somebody and they're very understanding of that. And then maybe like 2 months later, when you're like, well, I can't go and do this thing, it's like the novelty of your diagnosis maybe has worn off to that person, and now it's like becomes like frustrating that you can't do that thing to them.
Did you have that? Is this coming up because you had that feeling? Because I didn't come to your house to help you demolish it with all the asbestos, and I was like, I have stuff, and you went,
yeah, dude, I needed help.
Yeah,
I needed help,
right.
and I know that you play the CF card sometimes, and I thought that you were playing it. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's it. What did it take? 36 years for the novelty to wear off. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
But yes, I feel like it is an unfortunate thing that a lot of people with neurological disabilities deal with. And I guess the question in that is, how have you dealt with that or experienced that, like this sort of kind of sense of like, well, like, prove it.
Other than
that
5 minutes ago when
thing.
Tiller told you that the dogs were a figment of your imagination.
Yeah, erase that. That was a figment of your imagination too. So erase that.
I never said that.
He never said that. Just gaslighting her in circles to.
You know, it's actually, your question makes me feel really grateful for how far I am from that time, because right when I was diagnosed and I was having to tell friends about what I needed and family members and about, you know, everyone had in their mind the old version of me, this like hyperactive athletic person. And I think it was harder to let go of that. But now so much of my life has been created like with disability integrated into it that I really almost never encounter it. I think the biggest gaslighter is myself, who will still sometimes be like, maybe this time, this one situation will be fine. That has never once been fine. But I think when I was first diagnosed, I also wasn't, you know, I think it takes a lot of time to be confident in your own limitations and confident expressing them. And I think that comes with like age and practice and acceptance. And I also think, you know, so I got diagnosed when I got sick at 28, diagnosed at 30. And it wasn't until I was probably 33 that I started to consider myself disabled. You know, during that time, I had a disability placard in my car. I got a wheelchair. I was in grad school and utilizing disability student services. So there were like a lot of hints that I was disabled, but I sort of considered it this incidental term and a little meaningless. And then I started to learn about disability theory at 33 and see it as like a culture that I was part of. And I think learning about, you know, the strength and the creativity and the advocacy and all that comes with disability culture, I then started to feel more confident in my own needs, because I felt like, okay, I'm part of this group of people.
Right.
And there's all these people that have come before me, then I'm like resting on their shoulders and saying, I can't do that, or I need this. It's part of a bigger movement and not just my own weakness or my own deficiency. And so I think my view of illness shifted then from like a deficiency to, you know, a value neutral characteristic that put me in a new community.
That's wow. I mean, I said earlier we started like, you know, Jay Slice here has a way with words, but you really like that right there. There was something in that, and I can't put my finger on it. I'm going to go back and listen to this probably like 5 or 6 times, but there was something in what you just said there that really kind of, not to make this about myself, but just recently going through getting this new medication that's like completely transformed my entire relationship to my body and my existence, I'm still struggling to find the words to kind of put together what this experience has been like, because it's so confusing. And there's something about what you just said there that just made me think like, oh, right. Like it was as if I was I was immersed in this identity of a disabled person, a sick person. Mm-hmm. This is this is a part of my life. It's always been a part of my life. And then all of a sudden I'm still in that, but I've been shaken. And I'm in it, but maybe it's like I'm not in it. I'm not in this like groove that feels molded to my body and comfortable. I've been kind of popped out of the ice tray, and I'm just kind of leaning on, like tilting on the ice tray, and I'm not in my slot.
Well, now look who's got away with words.
Hey, thanks. That just came out of nowhere. But what you just said there, it's like you almost, whereas you almost like had this realization, this moment of like sliding into that groove and going, oh, okay. Now I can like just be relaxed here. And I feel like this identity thing has clicked. Whereas like mine has always been clicked on, and for some, it's just been like a moment where it just clicked out for a second. But anyway, it's thank you for stating that, because I think that I think a lot of people, even people who are in that community, oftentimes feel, or people like yourself who have been, a normie muggle their whole life and then become disabled, almost have this resistance to that identity because it's weak, definitely. Or because it's fragile, or it's needy, or whatever those like preconceived terms that are running through their head prior to like becoming someone who is a sick person. There's like a resistance.
I love the way that you described it as value neutral. Like it's not. It doesn't have to, like, it makes me think of how the system is what creates, like there was this great story, I'll butcher it, and I've told it before on the podcast, but this idea of like, what if a building was designed for only people who could fly, and there was no door and no elevator, and 50% of the population could fly and had wings, then that building would be great for them. But if there was no door and no elevator, I could be exactly the person that I am today, and I would feel less than. But that is the way that society is built for people with disabilities. And so like when you describe it as like being disabled is a value neutral thing, like there doesn't have to be anything inherently bad about it. But when society is not built to support it, then that's what makes me feel like, oh, it's a lot harder for people to live with disabilities when people who aren't disabled aren't considering that they exist.
How do you sorry, go ahead.
And what I like have come to think since then, well, actually, are you all okay if I take like a 3-5 minute break?
Yeah.
As long as you need.
Yeah, three consecutive 5-minute breaks.
Anywhere from 3 to 5. I'm not committing.
Yes, absolutely.
Of course.
I'll be right back.
What? Okay, I guess.
Guys, I'm really good at that.
Good job. Good for you.
Wait, you are very good. But good. I had something I don't know if I can do that. Say. Do you want me to keep going with that?
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. So we're back.
Okay.
Take it away.
So the thing I kind of piggybacking on what you said, that like, so first I was like, okay, I'm disabled, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But then I started to think over the last few years that all of the reasons I had thought it was bad to be disabled actually make life hard for everyone. That the reason we don't want to be disabled is because like collectively we value productivity, like consumerist productivity, but then also independence and strength and immortality and invincibility, and like that we're also scared of fragility and all of that, but that being scared of that and avoiding it doesn't hurt anyone, because the non-disabled people are spending their whole lives running from weakness too, which is a delusion. And instead of like our neediness being a thing we can all share together, it's like we're also desperate to not be needy. And so anyway, I've just been thinking so much in these last few years that being afraid of disability is not only bad for disabled people, but it actually is bad for everyone.
Yeah.
Because it comes for us all, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
We're all weak.
like we're all fragile, you know. It doesn't.
Yeah.
You put a disabled person in and Taylor in the street,
Wait, oh.
and both of them are about to get hit by a bus going the same speed. They're both going splat. And you know, if anything, maybe the person who uses a wheelchair might have like a little bit of an advantage because there's something else like you know, taking some of the blow, whereas Taylor in just his meat suit just gets
It doesn't
exploded.
matter how many
Just my
kilometers
skeleton.
he's biked this week.
But like
Just
that
my
is the
skeleton.
thing. Like we are all such a we are just a little speck of nothingness that exists for just not even a blink of time, and
It makes me think of like
we're no different.
of like you saying that Jay Slice is like the person that you know you can think of that has spent their whole life being like staunchly independent about like everything, like never like will never take like a hand of help for anything, like, you know, the person that's like, I need to like, oh, I think we need to move the fridge, and they're like, I'll just do it. And you're like, man, you need a second. Nope. And then the inevitable day comes when that person gets sick or whatever, like anything happens and they need help. And like, just like everybody knows that person, like, you know, that the version of that person that's like in your life or has been in your life. And that like everybody will come to that point, like you said, Jessica, that they will need like a weakness, whether you want to use that word. I actually love that you use that word, that like we are weak. Like, to not put it as like that like having a weakness or being weak at some point or always is a bad thing, but just like a thing to accept within ourselves.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I've never really thought. I've never. I guess like we think about the word and use the word weakness
Pejoratively.
yes. Yeah. Where instead of using it. Instead of using it as more of just like a neutral, a neutral adjective
or a unifier, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, so I know I said at the very top, like I was like, hey, like, oh yeah, we're gonna be talking about dating. Fucking
This has
scrap,
been very romantic.
scrap that shit. But maybe just to bring things into a little bit more of a perspective of that, but still kind of sticking with this lens of you, Jess, and like your what this sort of transition and shift in your life has looked like. And I'm sure this is something that is like constantly changing and shifting for you. I would love to know, so like you mentioned, you are married, you have children, you wrote a book, co-wrote a book on dating with disability. You have a book coming out soon about parenting with a disability. So one thing I would love to pick your brain about, there's two, actually. Well, I'll start with this one. So how has disability or your experience with your disability influenced your views on attraction? And however you take that, I mean, that could be how, if it's, you know, changed the way that you perceive others, if it's changed the way that you perceive yourself, if it's changed the way that you think about what attraction means to you.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think there were two things happening at once for me when I was sort of evolving how I thought about attraction. One, you know, I ended a very long relationship 2 years after I became sick. And so I started dating. I had not dated from 18 to 30 and then started dating at 30. And during that time, I was doing what I think so many of us are going through, what so many of us go through, like God willing, where we stop pursuing people who are unobtainable and start enjoying relationships where there's safety. Like, I think that's a really hard transition to make. I think a lot of us try to make that transition in our 30s, and I was doing that. Like, thinking that chasing or you know that not knowing if someone liked me was the same thing as love, you know, that uncertainty and like equating uncertainty and fear with attraction. So I was sort of decoupling those, but also coming to terms with my own body and like if I was attractive or not, and coming to terms with like my own needs. You know, I think one part of becoming disabled at 28 is that I carry with me all the entitlement of going 28 years not being disabled. So I sort of just assumed people would still want to date me. Like I really had outsized confidence dating as a disabled person. I was living in the Bay Area and going out with people a lot and like having a lot of casual sex, and like was really surprised every time someone was deterred by my illness or disability, which I'm sort of glad for. I'm glad I didn't have decades of being, you know, having my confidence like broken down. I was like, why? I'm great. Like, and which I think is just a, you know, a holdover from not being disabled and not being mistreated for a long time. But when you talked about attraction, there's another part of it, which is that, you know, I'm queer, and I found that being disabled made it so it was like much easier for me to slip into relationships with men, because I could sort of see my role as this like damsel in distress, this like needy, weak woman, and like accept caregiving kind of in that particular structure. And I think for me as a person, you know, with like limited imagination at the time, I just couldn't see where I would slide in another relationship structure. I was like, who would I be where the gender roles aren't as defined? And that's a way that I think like my view on attraction has, you know, evolved since that time I was dating, where I'm like, oh, I could have had a bit more imagination. I didn't need to slot myself in quite so much.
Sure. That's fascinating. I mean, okay. So just on the back of that, now, you know, so you are in this long-term relationship, and this is something we've talked about on the show a number of times, but like balancing the sort of expectations or I guess like requirements or needs between things like romance and needing to be taken care of, you know, like caregiving and or I guess caretaking from your stance, and romance and passion. You know, we've heard from a lot of people that are like, it's fucking hard to be you know, to be the sexy partner who also needs like you know, to be mothered by their partner. So what has that looked like for you since I guess getting into a long-term relationship where those are things that you're constantly juggling, as opposed to, you know, a very casual fling where, hey, you know, you don't see me in my worst, so I don't really need to rely on you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that transition or that balance is maybe different before kids. You know, at this point, our lives are so just heavy with responsibility and logistics that I more see it like, how do we transition from business partners running a family to having a romantic connection? You know, actually my care needs, while significant, are almost like times for us to connect, you know, that it's actual time of us together instead of just sharing an Instacart grocery list and a spreadsheet of the chores. And, you know, so I think earlier in the relationship, it was different. But I will say my husband, so I met my husband when I was 32, about to turn 33. And his devotion to me is one of the most romantic things I've ever seen. He this is just the 2 weeks ago. he experienced a death of someone very close to him, and it had been obviously a very hard day. And we said goodnight, and our baby's young enough that he's still sleeping in the baby's room. So he went to the baby's room, and as soon as he left, I shattered a glass, and it broke all over the floor, and one of the pieces of the glass lodged in my toe. And I'm fine, but because of my disability, cleaning up glass is pretty risky for me to do. I could get very injured. And he heard the noise, and he came in to check. And this is at the end of one of his very hardest days, and he thought he was done for the day, and instead he's cleaning up a glass that has gone everywhere. And we just started laughing, and and then as he was getting towards the end, I realized there were a lot of little pieces still. And I remembered back when I was a waitress in my 20s that if you take bread and put it on broken glass, it can pick up like a bunch of the last little pieces.
Oh, wow.
So I said,
tip.
Good.
yeah. I also came on for
Clip this for social media, Brian. This is good. This is good TikTok content.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, do we still have any sourdough in the fridge? And without skipping a beat, and this breaks my heart, he said, oh, do you need some toast? I'll go make you some.
Oh.
I'll go whip up a SCOBY.
I'll go make an entire loaf of bread.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, honey, no, I don't need toast. It's
Oh, you didn't capitalize on it. Wow.
That's
okay.
really
Yeah.
sweet. That's really
That's
sweet.
nice.
I thought when you said
That is
his
really
devotion,
sweet.
I thought you meant that he like made you a shrine or something.
He collected all the glass, and he made me. He made a
He
little me.
made a little glass doll out of it.
there's miniature Jessica's just like all over the house.
They're all hanging over the head. There's also weird like effigies. Just like it's actually
Who doesn't love a good effigy?
I mean I do like that is firstly congratulations.
That's awesome.
I love that. It's beautiful to hear that. And for anybody out there listening who's looking for that, it exists. There are some lovely partners out there. And it is really really amazing to have. I'm in the same boat. I have a partner that just like is just so selfless and beautifully supportive, and it really is nice. Do you feel, with your statement about trying to balance like romance with and connection with like, not feeling like your business partners, how much of do you feel like you would have that same sort of feeling if you say you weren't disabled? You never got diagnosed with POTS. Do you think things would look different?
That part, no. I think having kids,
That's just
I'm
like
sorry, I
that's
don't
the
know
parent
this, but
thing.
I think one of you has kids. Is that right?
Yeah, Taylor.
Yeah, I have 2 kids. Yeah.
Okay, 2 kids. Okay,
I have one that's also 6 months.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
February 26th.
Oh, we're February 17th.
There you go. Look at that.
Wow.
Little
Yeah.
Frank.
This is a nice little smile
Yeah.
on you there.
Yeah.
They're cute kids.
23 weeks
Yeah.
and 6 days.
But Taylor's perfect. He never struggles with anything. The babies always sleep. Him and Kyle are having lots of wild, amazing sex all the time.
Yeah, they won't stop
So like
fucking.
he's not the one. He's not like that's why we're here asking you, because I'm just like I got to get some realness out here. 'Cause
Wait, no, truly, Taylor, don't you feel like the transition from 1 kid to 2 is like a transition from having 1 kid to having like a lifestyle of being a parent?
Oh, totally. Like one kid was like there was a lot of questions because you go from not having a kid to having a kid. So you're like, there's a lot of things that you're uncertain of. And I felt like that transition was just like a short-lived, like, oh, it's actually not as much as I thought that it was. And I kind of created this thing in my head.
Yeah,
and then going from 1 to 2 was like the opposite, where I went, well, I know all the answers. And I feel like it'll just be the same, but it was
just double the food.
It's just
double the food.
No, it's exponential. It's not a doubling.
it's double the food. It's double the diapers. It's double the.
It's not a doubling. It's a fact. It's a factorial like order of magnitude.
That's
different from 1 to 2. It's like it is wild. It is wild because when you have 1, you've got 2 people that can handle the one thing, but now you've you've doubled the kids and halved the available hands because so it's a factor of four.
I understand what you're saying, but I think the thing that, because both of you have 6 month olds, I think the thing that you're failing to mention is that if you don't have a second kid, then you're going to have a 12-year-old that's an only child, and that is way worse.
Hey man,
right.
no,
Like,
no,
how many
no, no,
yeah.
no.
like how many only childs do you know?
No.
That
Listen,
are like,
I don't know.
that
I think
are like,
I don't think any of them made it.
bullshit.
I don't know
Bullshit.
any.
Bullshit. My best
They've
friend
all,
Jordan.
They've
is
all left.
No,
They've all,
no.
They're all no longer with us.
Preconceived with Zale Mednick. Listen to the episode about only children.
I am curious though on the children part. Like, I don't find. I mean, I only have one kid that really like demands attention at an enormous rate because with our 6 month old, I mean, it's really like she's just breastfeeding like all the time. That's basically all she does. And that's, she's transitioning now that she's 6 months. You know, she's starting to crawl and starting to move and stuff. So that's kind of changing now. But with our we have a 2.5-year-old, and I mean, I'm trying to imagine. You know, we've been recording and we took a break, and, you know, you kind of need to take breaks, and there's physical challenges and there's cognitive or neurological challenges. Like, you know, once a kid gets to like 1.5 years, 2 years old, I mean, like the demands on play and you know, imagination and like it takes a lot of mental load that goes into taking care of, you know, placating a 2.5-year-old and making them feel like they are, you know, engaged in this like world of play and excitement and imagination all the time. And it's a lot. It's a lot, you know. I love it, but it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's like doing anything that you love. Once you're done, you're like, oh, I love it. So I wasn't really thinking about it, but now I realize that it was the most taxing thing I've ever done.
Oh, it's exhausting. Yeah.
How is that? Like, how do you handle that? What are the upsides that I don't know about? What are some of the challenges and things that you struggle with?
I mean, I think we're always adjusting how we're handling kid stuff because my needs, you know, dictate a lot of what I can do hands-on. I'm always and will likely always be the logistics guy and the money guy in our house. You know, I'm the one who's keeping things going in that way, which I'm happy to do and kind of like. You know, when our 6-month-old was brand new, we sort of split his care evenly. Now he's getting a little heavier and it's really hard for me to lift him. So usually I'm taking him, but not when he's going down for a nap or having to do things that are a lot of like up, down lifting. You know, there's just a lot of communication around it. When the play gets, I don't know, but I think the thing I have learned in my own life, but then also writing Unfit Parent, is that like when you are disabled, and I'm sure you all notice this doing this podcast, is that like people are very good at creative solutions, and like parents are no different. You know, I'm just constantly like innovating ways to make different things work. You know, with both of my kids love riding on my wheelchair and love going on walks, you know, sitting on my lap on the wheelchair. We have like chairs in every location that we'd want to play. You know, we're just always thinking like, how can we, it's less like I'm taking the way you would play with your kids or the way my husband plays with, you know, our older daughter, and like try to like push myself into that. It's like with my kids, I'm inventing like brand new ways of being together.
That's cool.
How do you, you know, the days when like for whatever reason, you know, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to go and do this thing that I just traditionally always do with Zaya, our older daughter. And then for some reason she's like, Dad, I don't love you today. And you're like, okay. And it's like, it has to be mama. Like it's gotta be mama. It's gotta be. But she's, you know, I feel like I probably deal with something similar to this, like just like temporarily with the newborn, where like, where we think about, you know, if she's feeding our newborn and Zaya like needs mom, and like how to talk about it in a way where it doesn't make Zaya feel where we try to avoid saying things like, well, she's feeding the baby. Like she can't because she's feeding the baby. To try and
you're
to try,
less important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Try to avoid things that make it feel like, well, the baby's more important than you right now. So, and that's why she can't go and do this thing. So like I feel like when she's like, oh, I want mama for this thing, I'm kind of always kind of trying to come up with neutral reasons why that cannot happen and why it has to be me while she, and I'm assuming that probably
something to do with like the planets, like Mars is in retrograde,
yeah,
baby.
It's usually astrology. I usually lean
full
on
moon
astrology.
today. Sorry.
She's actually Zaya's actually super enthralled with an astrology book right now.
I bet.
So
I bet. Did Uriel give it to her?
That my mom gave to her. Yeah. So yeah, I usually do lean on astrology, but I'm assuming that's something that you probably have to deal with on a fairly regular basis of like, you know, you just can't do something because like whatever reason, that's just like you're whatever. And there's got to be ways to like talk to your child and like and sort of soothe their, you know, their totally unreasonable request that it has to be this specific person doing this specific thing. Like, how do you deal with that?
You know, we talk about disability very openly. And, you know, part of it is that our 7-year-old's autistic. And so we talk about our needs as if they're nothing to be ashamed of. You know, I'll say I can't because of my disability. And like we really strive to talk about it, like I had said earlier, in this value neutral way that we all have needs. We all have things we can't do. And we, you know, sometimes it comes up. She recently confessed for the first time. She said, I don't like your disability. And I was like, okay, you know, this was going to happen. And I asked why. And the reason was like absolute nonsense. Like it actually had nothing to do with my disability. She was like, because you wouldn't let me have 2 popsicles. And I was like, oh, okay. So, and it took her until
Classic.
7 to even say that the first time, and she didn't mean it. Afterwards, I was like, you don't have to like my disability. You can tell me if you don't. And she said, I was just trying to say that. And I was like, okay.
I mean, because I would imagine that you know, if you reference like I can't because of my disability for this and that, and like that happens over a period of time, I would imagine that a kid would like ultimately sort of personify your disability. Like they would see it as like a thing or a person that like maybe as just like a way to like concretely think about it in their mind of like I can't because of this is almost like that they might kind of establish it as like this living breathing thing that's kind of like other than you that takes you from them in certain instances, and they kind of could I guess like grow a resentment, like not like a necessarily like a valid resentment, but like just like a way of like a kid trying to deal with something that they would rather not be there. Like
I guess it sounds like you need to also talk about it in a positive way, because if you're being open and saying like, you know, I can't do this because of my disability, then there also has to be this like counterbalance to this, I guess, and a way to talk about it in a positive way so that it maintains that sort of neutral aspect of it. Like, is that true? Like, how do you talk about your disability in a way that doesn't just make it seem like it's, you know, only a thing that prevents you from being able to do things?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I don't think I talk about it as a negative or a positive. I'll say I can't because of my disability, but I never act like I'm ashamed or sad about that. I just like, it's just my limit. Like everyone has limits and she has limits. And my husband also has limits. You know, everyone in this house has limits. And, you know, we never explicitly say the positive. I think she knows the positives. Like, I think I'm very, very good at being present with her. And I'm really good at engaging. You know, being disabled has forced me to sit still a lot, you know, which I didn't do for 28 years. And I don't get bored easily. I'm almost never, I can't remember the last time I was bored. And I think having a parent who will reliably listen to you and focus and be 100% engaged, I think she's picked up on like that is also part of living in the body I live in. That I can't, I can't drive. I don't drive her places. But I don't know. She really loves sitting with me and knows that I will do it and can do it and won't need to move on to the next thing. It's not hard to pin me down. Like I'm here. And and I've never said that explicitly, but I think she knows, like, she knows kind of just in her heart that we're all like complex people who have different things to offer. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think
that's beautifully put. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that what are some of the misconceptions that you feel like some people might have about parenting with a disability, or how kids like receive care from parents who live with disabilities?
I'm guessing that's where the name of the book came from. There's something to do with that, because unfit parent.
Yeah, I didn't write a book saying that we're all unfit.
I'm an unfit parent. Call child services. This is a cry for help.
Yeah, well,
my child wrote this book, actually.
Just like a sharp left turn in my.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest misconception and where the title of the book came from is that many disabled parents, in fact most people who have their children removed, at least in the US, the parents have a disability. And in 22 states in the US, it's legal to remove a child from their home, and the primary reason can be parental disability, like even without specific record of neglect or abuse. If there's an indication to a social worker that the parent has a disability that could lead to these things, that's enough for child removal. And then what makes that so tricky is that disabled parents are often poor because of kind of terrible social safety nets. And so disabled parents are often interacting with governmental services. And then anyone who's working in governmental services is required to report suspicion of child abuse or neglect. And so it's like disabled people are constantly in a system that removes their children from them. And like when I interviewed people for the book, everyone I interviewed had encounters with social services. And so I think that is the biggest misconception, is that we're not safe and not good parents. And, we just simply are. Like we are, one way I think about it is that I live with a very fragile and needy body, and I practice every day caring for my fragile and needy body. And like the biggest example of a fragile and needy body is a newborn baby. And so like I was so well equipped to care for a newborn because I am an expert at that.
It's crazy because it makes me think of the conversation around MAID and people with disabilities. It's like this idea that instead of providing them with the resources that might help them do a better job, it's like let's do this like thing that is like it's just like not very creative. It's like, okay, this person is suffering, let's let them end their life, rather than let's do the work to figure out how we provide better resources so that these people don't suffer. And it seems like it's the same sort of idea with parenting and mentioning child services, taking away kids from parents for the explicit reason that they have a disability and they're struggling. It's like, well, why not just give them more support? Like, isn't there, and I'm sure it's complicated. Like, I get that. Like, I think that is the thing. It's like, yes, it probably is complicated.
It's
but isn't it a better result to do that?
We're working on a series right now for on a series that's covering caregiving in Canada, basically, essentially, in broad strokes. And one of the things that came up was, especially in like marginalized community, Black and Indigenous communities, like the on the topic of young caregivers who are caring for their parents or siblings, but in the context of caring for their parents, there's this it's very common for like disabilities or disease within families to be kept a secret, like across the board, not like race specific, but then in marginalized communities, that it's even that secrecy lends itself to like an even more kind of like sinister nature, that inhibits young caregivers to provide better care or to seek support for what they're going through as being young people with enormous responsibilities. And the reason being is that they are worried, in large part, that if the wrong, in quotations, the wrong person finds out that they have a disabled parent, that they will be taken away from the home. And then they will not be able to support their parent anymore. And from the young caregiver's lens, they're thinking, well, then I won't. Then what happens to my mom or dad or person that I'm caring for, that like really depends on me to be there for them? Just a very very sad, just a very sad circle of circular shittiness.
Right.
Well,
I mean, I think something, Jeremy, I've thought about with your recent, like how much your life has changed with the medication. It's not called trifecta, but it's called something similar. Is that right?
Trikafta, yeah.
Trikafta, okay.
Trikafta, yeah. I mean,
it's 3 medicines together.
Yeah. So it is a trifecta of meds. Yeah,
that's right.
Oh,
yeah.
that's
Like
why
that
it's
actually.
It actually is that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when people say trifecta, I never correct them. I go, yeah, that's it.
That's
pretty much
basically
it.
it.
That's accurate.
Yeah.
That I listened to your recent episode with is it Connie?
Yeah.
Connie. And the way you all talked reminds me a lot of like what I've thought about with disability, which is basically like we are terrible at predicting what we want. Like we, if you had asked me before becoming sick, would I want to give up running? Would I want to give up the business I owned? Would I want to give up that relationship? All of it, I would have been like, absolutely not. I would think my life would not be worth living. I mean, that may be too extreme, but I would have thought this was a far, far inferior life where I would be very hard to find joy. And I would have been wrong. Like, I think we have this like failure of imagination, but I also think it's really interesting, like what you've encountered where, you probably would have said for so long, all I want is a way out of this death sentence. And then when that possibility was opened up, like the adjustment has been, from what you've said, like so much harder than you expected. And ultimately you'll like I would imagine you'll acclimate, but that I think we are, like when we imagine future scenarios, we just aren't that good at knowing what we actually want or how it will feel.
Yeah.
And we're
even
also,
like
we're
I was gonna say, even when you're like, I was even told, I was even told, like when I started Trikafta, I remember being asked by a healthcare provider, like, and do you want to talk to a psychologist about all this? And I was like, about what? About how fucking awesome this is? No. And then it wasn't until like maybe a month later where I was like, oh shit, right. In retrospect, I wasn't listening. I really wasn't like taking in all of the info that I had in front of me, because I was distracted by this, like by the positivity of it all.
Yeah.
So even when we're like told,
and you even see it in our everyday, like, quote unquote everyday things, like, when if you aspire to like get a certain amount of money or like have certain things, like material things in your life, and then like you like you think in your mind that these are the things that I want, and then you get there and you are there with that money, with those things, and you are like, but why don't I have this feeling
I have
that
too
I thought
many
I would have?
Sea-Doos to choose from.
So many Sea-Doos.
Yeah.
and you're like, maybe one more Sea-Doo. And then, but then you get there and you go like, oh, but there's this weird feeling, and it doesn't feel like fulfillment. And so, that really is just like the representation of going, oh, I actually don't know what I want.
I mean, something you mentioned there, like if someone had asked you, do you want to give up running? Do you want to give up your business? Do you want to give up these things? Which, that is a hard thing it's a hard thing to think about. I typically don't like to talk in hypotheticals, mostly because it's like, what do we really have to gain there? But
I love hypotheticals. I love the hypothetical idea of imagining if you won the lottery or things like that. I mean, that's why I buy lottery tickets. I buy them for the opportunity to think about what it would be like to win it.
So can we just make sure we cut that out? Right? Yeah, okay. So the reason I bring that up is I would like to just kind of talk about right now in this moment.
Yeah.
Reflecting on your experience, what would you say is the biggest thing that all of this, your experience with disability up to this point, has taken away from your life?
Do you want it to be a negative thing, or
it's whatever comes to mind? What would you what's the biggest thing that POTS and EDS has taken away from you?
what it took from me is I had this sort of manic drive to do everything as perfectly as possible until I turned 28. I thought satisfaction was just on the other side of being better at X, better at running, better at work, if I had more fun with my friends. Every trip I went on, I planned every moment of it to make sure I got to the restaurants that would be the most delicious. I thought I was so close to a good life, and that it was a matter of doing better. And then having to give up everything kind of forced me to let go of that. And letting go of that allowed me to actually experience moments of satisfaction and peace.
Do you want another chance to try to get that answer perfect, or are you good with that answer there?
Wow, that was great.
Okay,
that was wonderful.
So this is actually a two-part question, and I love that answer. The second part is, what would you say is the biggest thing that it has given you?
Well, that I guess that was kind of what I did, but you'll cut this pause, right?
No, we're going to leave it for just
dramatic effect.
Yeah, the dramatic effect is...
Can you breathe into the
Add
mic?
some music to it.
Every single person picked up their phone and went, did I just accidentally pause?
I do that.
All the time.
I think what it gave me is this feeling of connection to other people. I feel, what we've talked about a little, our shared weakness. I feel so much more part of the world. I feel like we're all, that term, Rage Against the Dying of the Night. We're all just trying in this really beautiful way to fight against our inevitable collective death. And I feel part of something that's futile and really beautiful. And I feel I'm in it in a way I didn't feel before.
Man, Jessica, I love you.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
Jessica, this has been a slice.
Oh.
Why did I laugh at that? Fuck. Yeah. Honestly, so for folks that are as enamored with this as much as we are, I said at the very top, but I'll say it again. Jess has a number of books. Dateable is available now. This Is How We Play is up for pre-order, right? That's that with the illustrated children's book, or has that been released?
Yeah, that's September 24th, so it depends on this release date.
Right. Okay. Perfect. So September 24th of 2024 is when that's coming out. So just look at your calendar when you're listening to this. Who knows? And then an Unfit Parent is coming up. That's April of 2025, but also available for pre-order.
It
and
is.
But let people know how can people stay up to date with the work that you're doing, but if they're interested in these books, how can they find it? Where do they go? How do they find you?
My website's jessicaslice.com, Instagram Jessica Slice, and you can get links to order the books there, but they're available anywhere you buy books, or Googling. And as I'm sure authors have said on this podcast, but pre-orders are so important for books because they show the publisher that it's worth putting more like money and more books in the first printing. They really help authors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you go to Jessica's website, there's a big blue button, pre-order now, and you just click that, and
it's pre-ordered.
If you now be careful, because if you click it once, it's coming. Jess, this was so delightful, and to be honest with you, you
were gonna say it was a slice.
No, I wasn't. I had tons of questions here that we didn't even scratch the surface of. This really just kind of went in the direction that it just so naturally felt that it went, and I'm so glad that it did. I would be honored to have you back on at some point to dive into, specifically just really deep dive into some subjects that you are currently really passionate about or thinking about, or maybe when the book comes out, we can circle back and have another conversation. But you're an incredible guest, and I'm so honored to have had the opportunity to sit down and chat with you. We think you're great, and
you really do.
This has been truly just a wonderful recording.
And
so
honestly, we've been trying to keep our recordings to 40 minutes. And,
I was looking at the time. I was
we did not.
Fuck. I was like, fuck this. Fuck
it. So
but we also took a break.
You can tell. Well, it was a short break. It was
3 to 5 minutes.
But
it was 3 consecutive 5-minute breaks.
You can tell that we love you because we doubled the time that we said yesterday. We weren't going to go over that time.
Yeah. There's actually something I don't know why I feel compelled to share it. You said something, and I thought about it. It was something. It was something to do about we're
You're
not
not recording. So if I
No,
bite a my granola bar, it's fine.
Oh yeah, bite away.
Yeah, you bite away.
We are still recording.
I had this experience.
Wait, hold on. Just let her say goodbye first. We just steam her. Thank you, Jess. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Because I do want to get that. I do want to get that recorded. And then we'll cut that. So thank you, Jess. That was great. Thank you so much. We think you're awesome. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you, and you guys are great. I really loved it.
Do you want to do that again? Do you want to get that more perfect?
I had this.
Did you want me to say nicer things about you?
That's right. Yeah. Actually, could you add?
Did you hear what I said to you? I mean,
we paid you so many compliments.
You said great. That's not even that.
You guys are great.